We are ready for our long-haul trip to Melbourne, but maybe we can get some tips for our flight before we go.
If you think you know everything there is to know about flying and planes, you're wrong.
I don't.
Even if you get on a plane once a week, there are still some things you may not be aware of and some secrets that are not told to passengers. Like, why are most seats blue? And what's the dirtiest thing on a plane?
Can I just say, I didn't know that all seats are blue, and I didn't think all seats were blue. But these seats look like the least safe seats I have ever seen. They cannot be real. Surely.
If you've ever flown on a plane, you've probably used the lavatory and you probably remember how it works. Well, not the actual toilet, but the lock system on the door. Once someone's inside, they'll lock the door and a red sign on the outside will show that the lavatory is occupied. You can try to open the door, but you might not be able to unless the person inside unlocks the door.
Apparently there is a way to unlock it from the outside that flight attendants, I better get that right, apparently they know how to do it.
Or can you? What if we told you you could open the lavatory door from the outside? There's an external lock mechanism which is usually hidden behind the lavatory sign on the outside, allowing a person from the outside to open the door. The mechanism exists in case of an emergency and for safety reasons.
Okay, so on our long-haul flight, now normally the most I would fly is maybe 4 hours, but obviously we're going, 22 to 24 hours, whatever it is. I am not nervous or anything about flying. I'm really looking forward to the flight, apart from one thing, and that is having to use the toilet. Not for a number one, but for a Richard III. Now, I'm quite a private person in that sense, and I am not looking forward to that. Any tips, anyone? Please let me know.
While many get scared if lightning strikes the plane they're on, most crew members will remain calm. Why? Well, because lightning strikes occur more often than you'd think, and there isn't a reason why you should be scared, since the last time a lightning strike caused a plane crash was in the 1960s. Today, planes are constructed in a way where a metal mesh layers the entire plane and conducts electricity, but keeps it away from the passengers and the crew members. This way, the plane can endure any stress or damage that lightning would inflict, while the passengers won't feel anything.
Isn't it something like a Faraday cage where it protects what's inside? I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Additionally, this mesh can protect them from all kinds of electronic equipment from electrostatic discharges. The mesh is so powerful that it can even protect the interior from electromagnetic radiation coming from the outside. So next time you see lightning strikes while on a plane, think about this and know you have nothing to worry about. Have you ever sat on a plane and heard sounds or chimes nonstop?
Yeah, you always hear that, but that's just for things like, taking your belt off, or that's when someone presses for a flight attendant to come and help them with something.
What if we told you that they actually have meaning? Sure, there's the sound signal for when you need to put your seatbelt on or when to take it off, but we aren't talking about those here. We're talking about the random chimes that go off throughout the flight. These sounds or signals are a secret code that the flight crew uses. Through them, they can communicate across the cabin in signals. These chimes could be messages about the remaining snacks or turbulence warnings. On rare occasions, these chimes could be coming directly from the cockpit, telling the flight attendants to smash that like button if you haven't done so already.
Yeah, as Beyond Facts channel says, smash the like button, and I'll add, make sure you subscribe.
But no, they indicate an emergency or a change in route. However, while the flight crew knows their meaning, passengers will usually not be able to recognize which chime means what.
I was just always under the impression that you got the one for seatbelts, one for you're in the air and you're fine, and the other was just when people press it to get the flight attendants to come over. There we go. You learn something new.
Like lightning strikes are very common on a flight, so are bird strikes. In the past, there have been a few times where a bird strike caused huge damage to the plane and in the engine of the plane, causing it to perform an emergency landing. But the chances of this happening are quite low. Today, most engines are tested against such strikes and are made to be durable if a bird hits them. They would simply push out the bird on the other side and continue as if nothing had happened. Now, if an engine isn't tested against this, it could lead to potential damage, but that's highly unlikely.
I would assume because the engine, the blades, the blades go so fast round and they are so strong and sturdy that there just wouldn't be any damage. They would rip it apart. It'd be like a blender. And obviously if it goes straight through, there's no real damage caused.
Even though bird strikes are common, they have no huge potential threat to the aircraft. You just purchased your ticket and went through security at the airport.
Right, I'm going to make a prediction here. They're going to say boarding last is the best. I'm going to say I disagree. Now, the reasons why I'm going to disagree, okay, from the top of my head, is because if you board last, you may run out of room for your bag in the storage cabinets, because there's never enough room. And therefore, if you don't have a space for it, it goes down in the hold. And that means if there's things you need in your bag, you can't really use them, can you? There's that. I don't know any other reasons, actually. That's my only reason.
And now you're at your gate waiting for boarding to be announced. As soon as it's announced that passengers can begin to board the plane, everyone rushes towards the door and to their seats, creating long lines and crowded places. Now, instead of doing this, you should consider boarding last. Why? Well, all the tickets have an assigned seat, so rushing to get to your seat won't achieve much since the plane won't leave until all passengers are on board.
That is true. That is true. And I will say this one funny story. So when we recently went to Mallorca, Ryanair, as this plane is, Ryanair they try and get everything as cheap as possible, right? The flights are as cheap as possible. So they add on stuff. So what they do is you could be in a couple, me and Charlie, obviously, and they will, unless you book your seats, they will put you one at the front, one at the back or whatever. And they will do that for anyone that doesn't book specific seats. Madness. And it's stupid, especially in COVID times. But what we did in the first flight was, because so many people didn't specifically book seats, so many people were next to random people. And on our flight to Mallorca, what we did was I think, on a window seat in like row 3. Charlie was on an aisle seat in row 5 or something like that. And there was only one other person next to us. And in that, the two people next to us were sisters. So all we did was, as soon as we took off, we said, "Do you want to swap?" And we swapped. And everyone else did that on the plane. We couldn't quite do that on the way back because it was really busy. But it is frustrating and stupid.
And since you already have your reserved seat, boarding last is better since you'll avoid long lines and crowds in the aisles on the plane. You'll be able to comfortably move along to your seat and avoid people pushing against you trying to find their seat.
I suppose so.
When the plane dims the lights, it isn't a code to force you to take a nap. The lights are dimmed so that the passenger's eyes can adjust to the darkness. This is done in case of an emergency or something going wrong during takeoff and landing. This prepares the passengers for potential evacuation and makes it easier for the emergency exit lights to stand out in the dark and be more visible to passengers. Upon boarding the plane, the flight attendants show you what you should do in case of an emergency, including how to use the emergency oxygen mask.
If you haven't realised already, these oxygen masks that look like that make you look like a pig. There you go. You might not have known that.
If the time comes when the masks drop, you should put the mask on as quickly as possible. But we bet you didn't know that you have about 30 seconds to put the mask on before you pass out. The masks usually drop if the cabin pressure falls to unsafe levels, meaning there isn't much breathable air available. When the masks drop, they allow you to safely breathe while the pilot drops the airplane to a lower altitude. Now, what you probably didn't know is that the oxygen masks are only equipped to pump out oxygen for about 12 to 15 minutes. But don't panic, they know what they're doing. This is exactly the time needed for the pilot to drop the plane to a safe altitude. So by the time you remove your mask, you'll be smashing the subscribe button and ringing that bell notification. But in all seriousness, you'll be in a safely pressurized cabin without potential damage. Have you ever wondered why the windows on a plane are round and not square? Well, it isn't a simple design choice, it actually serves a purpose.
What about the little hole that's always in them? There's always a little hole in one of the windows. Obviously not the outside one.
Back in the days, or until the 1950s, planes were using square windows. However, a series of crashes showed that the corners of the windows presented a flaw in the design.
I'm going to assume that because it's rounded, it spreads the pressure more evenly. That's what I'm going to say.
Due to the sharp corners of the windows, which acted as a weak point on the plane, the metal surrounding the window had a pressure 2 or 3 times greater than anywhere else on the fuselage. The square windows were changed to round windows with smooth edges to avoid the damage caused by sharp edges. Round windows are less prone to breaks and cracks.
I'm basically right, I'm going to say.
If you travel a lot by plane, then you've probably already noticed that many airlines choose the color blue for their seats or their interior design. And no, that isn't just because they like the color.
Ryanair, actually thinking about it, Ryanair does have like a blue pretend leathery types thing. But obviously EasyJet are orange because that's their colour. I assume British Airways is blue. But I just thought that was their company colours.
Many airlines choose this color since it's been proven that blue is associated with coolness and clearness, which explains why many hospitals also choose it. The airlines want to create a calm environment for the passengers and a relaxing feel. Sure, some airlines like to use different colors that are bolder, but most of the time they also focus on more muted tones to create a home-like feel for their passengers. This is done so that the passengers can be as comfortable and relaxed as possible on their flight.
They do say blue is a sort of a calming colour, and especially if you're on one of these cheap flights like this plane here. Actually, no, this is quite good because it's got TVs in the back, but this style plane, it is very much like, you know, loading cows onto a lorry or whatever, you know, that sort of cattle class. And it can be very stressful and very hustle and bustle. And so if blue is a colour that is calming, I think that makes sense. Good idea.
When you board a plane and take a seat, do you ever wonder who else has sat in this seat? And
No.
who's touched all the things you're about to touch?
Actually, no, I say that. I do think about who may have farted in the seat before me. Sorry, it's a weird thought, but that does actually go through my head.
Well, even though planes are regularly cleaned once a day, some things remain dirty. Some research has concluded that the tray table is one of the dirtiest things on a plane, if not the dirtiest one. Among other dirty things are the rubber armrest and the handle on the lavatory. It's recommended to bring sanitizing wipes to wipe down your space and keep it clean for your trip. Overall, planes are quite clean and not as dirty as many believe they are, but these few places are worth wiping down. In the end, it's all for your safety and your enjoyment on the flight. Being a pilot definitely comes with quite a few privileges. For example, one of them is the food that pilots eat during a flight. While the passengers will all eat the same frozen food that the flight attendants make, the pilots get to eat a bit more luxurious food. You might think that this isn't fair, but it's an essential rule that they have to follow. Each flight, the pilots get served a special meal that's different from the other meals they serve, just in case the airline food shipment turns out to be contaminated. Also, the 2 pilots on board aren't allowed to eat at the same time.
That's quite interesting. The whole aspect of if food was contaminated, you would assume that both pilots would get different food from different sources, the whole contamination thing maybe. But that's quite clever. That's interesting, that one.
After one pilot has finished his meal, the other pilot has to wait at least an hour before he eats. This is a rule they also have to follow to make sure that the food they've consumed won't cause them food poisoning or make them sick. This way, they avoid both pilots getting sick if such things were to happen. Another thing that you might not have realized about the plane you're on is that it often has secret chambers hidden inside the plane. These chambers serve as a little hideout for the pilots and the crew members so they can relax or have a nap while on board.
That looks like a fancy one. I watched on Amazon the program about long-haul flights. Their compartments were not as fancy as that. They were below deck and tiny and like a Harry Potter compartment. It was like. So yes, I know that if you're on a big plane, not on just a normal domestic style plane.
Being a pilot requires you to work up to 16 hours in a day, and sometimes this will also cause you to be exhausted. As they're not permitted to sleep in the cockpit, they'll go to their small chambers fitted with a bed where they can lay down and take the necessary sleep before going back to fly the plane. These chambers are often hidden and kept private and usually have one or multiple beds where a few crew members can take a nap at the same time and go back to work refreshed. But you'll never be able to see them go to these chambers, as they have secret passageways to get them there without being noticed by passengers. Bye for now.
Well, there you go. There you go. What do you think? Is there anything there? Is there anything there that you learned that was different? Interesting about the blue being a calming colour, and that's why they may use it. I don't think it's a good idea necessarily to go last on the plane. I see the pros, but there is also cons. Yeah, some are interesting, some weren't there. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time.